Today we're going to be going over percentages and being able to convert between a percent, fraction, and decimal. Before we get started, let's get used to some vocab that we'll be using throughout this lesson. Percent literally means out of 100. So when we're thinking about percent, it's anything out of 100. And the symbol that we can use to represent percentages is a percent sign, which most of you guys should be familiar with because you've seen it on your grading. When we think of one whole, that's the same thing as having 100 out of 100. That means that 1 is equal to 100%. And you can write this as 100 with your percent symbol. One whole, 1 is the 100%. Now let's think of this as a fraction. When we have 1/2, that's like having half of 100. Half of 100 would be 50. So if you have half, that's the same thing as having 50 per 100. Meaning that 1/2 is equal to 50%. And we can represent this as 50 with your percentage symbol. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky with your fractions. When you have 1/4, remember that you have to make this out of 100. So if you see 1/4, it's definitely possible to make this into a percentage, but you must first do something to get that denominator of 100. When you're thinking about an equivalent fraction, 4 times what will give you that 100? 4 times 25 gives you 100. Remember to put a 25 in the numerator, and you now know that 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. So 1/4 is the same thing as having 25 out of 100, which means it's equivalent to 25%. It can be written as 25 with your percent symbol. What's really interesting about when you have a 4 in the denominator of your fraction is that you can kind of treat this like quarters. And so yes, you can work it out like this, but these are fractions that would be like benchmark fractions and stuff that you can do in your head. So if you think about quarters, 1/4, that's like having 1/4 is 25. For this example over here, 3/4, that's like having 3/4, which would give you 75 cents out of the dollar. So that's the same thing as having 75 per 100. 3/4 is equal to 75%, and this can be written as 75 with your percentage sign. Remember, you can work this out just like we did with the 1/4, but if you think of quarters, you know you'll have their 3/4. And last one, 1/10 is the same as what? Again, when you're converting to your percentages, you need to get that denominator of 100. So I know that I can do 1/10 times something to give me that denominator of 100. 10 times 10 will give me that denominator of 100. Put a 10 in the numerator. And I know that 1/10 is the same thing as having 10 out of 100, which means that 1/10 is like having 10%. And again, you can write this as 10 with your percentage sign.